Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we are not just telling a story. We are uncovering a hidden scar on the conscience of history. We are going to look at an astonishing and terrible incident where a group of human beings was stranded on a tiny speck of sand in the middle of the ocean. They were not stranded for a month, not for a year. They were stranded for 15 years. This all happened during a dark era when people from Africa were captured, chained, and treated as cargo. One such ship, carrying a secret, illegal cargo of human beings, was torn apart by a rocky reef, swallowing most of its victims. In the terrifying chaos of the wreck, only 182 people survived the night. 122 of them were the ship's crew, the sailors. 60 were the African captives. Here is the first twist in this horrifying saga. The 122 sailors managed to build a new boat. Within 3 months, they sailed away to safety. But the 60 captives? They were left behind. They were trapped on that tiny, barren island for 15 whole years. Can you imagine it? A place with barely any vegetation. No source of clean drinking water. No natural food supply. After 15 years of this relentless, unimaginable struggle, how many do you think were left? When a rescue ship finally arrived, they found only 7 women and 1 small child. It is a story that is harrowing to its very core. How did they survive? And why were they abandoned? Before we descend into this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It is completely free for you, but it gives us the motivation we need to continue bringing you these important histories. Now, let us begin. Our story begins in the year 1761. The ship is a French vessel belonging to the French East India Company, named the L'Utile, which translates to the useful. A terribly ironic name, given its fate. It set sail from the port of Full Point on the coast of Madagascar. Its official mission was to sail to Mauritius, then known as Île-de-France. But the ship was carrying a dark secret. Its captain, Jean de Lafargue, was conducting an illegal operation. Against all regulations of the time, he had taken on a cargo of approximately 160 enslaved people, intending to sell them for a massive profit in Mauritius. In those days, this was a shadow economy. People were forcibly ripped from their homes and villages. Traders would pack them into the dark, suffocating holds of ships, and many would not even survive the journey. This was the brutal business that made men like Captain Lafargue rich. On board the L'Utile were about 142 French sailors and officers. Crammed below them, in the darkness of the hold, were 160 African captives, men, women, and children, chained and terrified. The ship's navigator, Barthélemy Castellan Duvernay, was responsible for charting the course. It was a difficult journey, known for its treacherous reefs and sudden storms. The ship was heavily loaded, clumsy in the water, and racing against time. Collision with the reef. On the night of July 31st, 1761, their luck ran out. The ship sailed into a vicious, unexpected storm. The sky was pitch black, with no stars to guide them. The navigator, Duvernay, had miscalculated their position. He believed they were in open water, but they were sailing directly for a deadly trap. A tiny, low-lying island of coral and sand known as Tromelin Island. It was an island that was barely visible on any map, a razor's edge hidden in the waves. In the chaos of the storm, lookouts screamed a warning, but it was too late. With a sound like a giant beast splintering wood, the L'Utile crashed directly onto the coral reef. The ship was immediately and catastrophically damaged. It did not sink slowly. It was torn open. For the sailors on the upper deck, it was chaos. They scrambled for lifeboats and debris. But for the 160 captives locked in the hold, it was an unimaginable tomb. As the ocean rushed in, they were trapped in the darkness, chained together. Most of them, at least half of the captives, drowned right there. never having a chance to fight for their lives. However, a miracle occurred amid the horror. The sheer force of the impact on the reef tore a massive hole in the side of the ship's hull. A few of the captives, in a desperate bid for freedom, managed to break free and swim out through that jagged opening, fighting the waves and the suction of the sinking ship. On the other side, the French sailors, being on deck, had a much better chance. They grabbed broken planks, barrels, and anything that would float. They battled the churning waves, and one by one dragged themselves onto the shore of Tromelin Island. After this complete catastrophe, as the sun rose on a scene of total destruction, the survivors took stock. 122 French sailors had made it to shore, and having clawed their way from the sinking grave, 60 of the African captives stood with them. The nightmare was far from over. Tromelin Island was, in reality, just a small, flat piece of sand. It was less than a square kilometer in size. Vegetation was almost non-existent, and the most terrifying problem, there was no fresh water, no springs, no rivers, no streams. The place was a prison. And here, the cruelty of the era showed its face immediately. The surviving French sailors, led by their officers, immediately re-established control. They ordered the 60 exhausted and traumatized African survivors to swim back out to the dangerous half-sunken wreck and salvage any useful materials. Braving the waves and the sharks drawn by the disaster, the captives worked for hours. They brought back food, water casks, tools, and heavy timbers. In the initial days, the salvaged rations, some dried meat, biscuits, flour, and a little wine, were strictly controlled by the sailors. It was clear this would not last long for 182 people. The water crisis was immediate. The salvaged casks were dwindling. Desperate with thirst, some people began to drink the salty seawater, which only made their condition worse, leading to sickness and delirium. It was then that the African captives, drawing on knowledge from their homelands, performed their first miracle of survival. They did not just sit and wait. They began to dig. In the very center of the island, they dug a deep pit into the sand. After hours of agonizing effort, they dug below the water table. At the bottom of the pit, water began to seep in. It was seawater, yes, but it had been filtered by the layers of sand and coral, making it just barely drinkable. This single act of ingenuity saved every person on that island from dying of thirst within a week. Betrayal and a broken promised life was now a grim routine, but the French sailors had a plan. They were sailors and carpenters. They would not wait for a rescue that might never come. They decided they had to build their own boat using the salvaged wood from the luteal. For 2 long, hard months, everyone worked. The sailors directed the construction, while the African captives were forced to do the hardest labor, hauling the heavy, waterlogged timbers. Life was slowly getting back on track, but the question of rescue remained. The sailors, however, were building a vessel that was clearly not large enough for all 182 survivors. After 2 months, the vessel was complete. They named it La Providence, the Providence, or Hope. This is the moment of the story's most profound betrayal. When the boat was ready to leave, only the 122 French sailors and officers boarded it. Not a single African captive was taken along. The 60 people who had saved them with their labor and their knowledge of finding water were left behind. As they were leaving, the captain made a hollow promise to the 60 captives watching from the shore. "We will return," he yelled. "We will definitely come back to get you from here." Imagine the scene. 60 people, abandoned, watching as the Hope boat, which they had helped build, grew smaller and smaller until it vanished over the horizon. After a difficult journey, the sailors reached Madagascar. They were safe. They told the governor the entire story, how the luteal sank, how they built a new boat, and how 60 people were still stranded on that island. They pleaded for help, but the governor flatly refused to send aid. He was furious. He said the entire trade operation was illegal from the start. He would not risk an expensive ship and crew to rescue illegal cargo. He was also busy with a war and claimed he had no ships to spare. The sailors, having saved their own lives, did not protest further. They melted back into society, and the 60 people on Tromelin Island were forgotten. The 15-year struggle. Back on Tromelin, the 60 captives stared at the empty sea. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. They wrote "help" in giant letters with stones. They lit signal fires, but no help arrived. They finally, painfully, realized the truth. They had been betrayed. They would have to fight for their own lives. And so began one of the most incredible survival stories in human history. When it became clear no help was coming, the 60 people began to organize. Water. They dug the well, their only source of life, even deeper, and reinforced it with stones to keep it from collapsing. Shelter. There was no wood. So they built their homes from the only material available: coral. They painstakingly quarried blocks of coral from the reef and built small, sturdy huts. They even salvaged lead plates from the shipwreck to use as roofing. Food. Initially, they survived on turtles and seabirds, but they needed a stable food source. So they built ingenious stone fish traps. They built long, V-shaped walls of stone in the shallow water. At high tide, fish would swim over them, but as the tide went out, the fish would be trapped behind the walls. They would then dry the fish in the sun to preserve them. Fire. They managed to save an ember from the shipwreck, and for 15 years, they kept a fire burning day and night. It was a symbol of their life and their hope. Everyone was given a responsibility. Someone managed the precious water. Someone repaired the fish traps. Someone cared for the sick. A woman named Simiavo, a captive from Madagascar, emerged as a leader, guiding her people through this long darkness. But their story is also one of tragedy. After some time on the island, about 20 of the survivors, including 18 men, grew desperate. They built a small raft from the last remaining pieces of wreckage. They told the others, "We will go to Madagascar and bring back help. Wait for us." They set off, and they were never seen again. They were consumed by the ocean. Now, only about 40 people remained, mostly women. Years passed. The people on the island kept dying from sickness, hunger, and weakness. Yet, they endured. A child was even born on the island, a new life in a place of death. Rescuing the final rescue years passed. On the other side of the ocean, one man's conscience was not clear. It was the navigator, Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet, the man whose miscalculation had wrecked the ship. He never forgot the 60 people he had left behind. He kept writing letters, petitioning the company, begging the government to send a rescue ship. He was ignored for years. Finally, 11 years after the wreck, one of his letters reached a new governor who was moved by the tragic story and ordered a rescue. A ship was sent. The survivors on Tromelin saw it. Imagine their joy. They lit their fires, they waved, they cried. But the ship could not get close. The captain saw the same dangerous reefs that had destroyed the Betrayal. Deeming it too risky, the captain did the unthinkable. He turned the ship around and sailed away. This failed attempt once again broke the hopes of the survivors. But Duvernay, and now the governor, did not give up. After another year of persistent efforts, on November 29, 1776, 15 years, 4 months, and 9 days after the shipwreck, a French ship named La Dauphine finally managed to reach the island. The captain, named Tromelin, whom the island is now named after, personally landed on the shore in a small boat. What he saw was heartbreaking. Where 60 people had once been, there were now only 8 survivors, 7 women and 1 child, an 8-year-old boy who had been born on the island. They were standing near their sturdy coral huts. Nearby was their well. On the shore were their fish traps. They were wearing clothes they had skillfully woven from feathers. They had survived for 15 years. The 7 women and the child were brought onto the ship. They were taken to Mauritius. There, the governor declared them to be free citizens. The child was adopted and given a name. The women were given support, but nothing could ever compensate for the 15 years they had lost, or the dozens of lives that had been extinguished by greed and betrayal. Outro music begins softly, then swells. Host: friends, thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this video to the end. This is more than a story. It is a testament to human resilience and a terrible reminder of human cruelty. If you were moved by this story and our presentation, please share it with your friends. And please, do not forget to subscribe to our channel. We will meet you in the next fascinating video. Until then, thank you.